This is the Your Kick-Ass Life podcast, episode number 85 with guest Amy Smith. All links and resources you hear in this podcast can be found by going to yourkickasslife.com/85.
This is the Your Kick-Ass Life podcast with Andrea Owen, a no BS guide to self-help and badassery. Because ladies, let's face it, life's too short for it to not kick ass. And here's your host, the girl who serves it up straight with a side of crazy, Andrea Owen.
Hello, my lady ass kickers. Welcome to another episode of the show. As always, I'm so happy that you're here. And I'm very excited for today's guest because this is her third time, I believe, on the Your Kick-Ass Life podcast. And she is known around the world as Amy Smith, also known as the Joy Junkie. And she's also known as my very best friend in the entire world. So for those of you that don't know who she is, Amy E. Smith is a certified confidence coach, masterful speaker, and personal empowerment expert. Founder of thejoyjunkie.com, Amy uses her roles as coach, writer, podcaster, and speaker to move individuals to a place of radical personal empowerment and self-love. With acute focus on helping people find their voice, she is highly sought after for her uncommon style of irreverence, wisdom, and humor, and has been a featured expert on Fox 5 News San Diego and YourTango.com. So without further ado, here is Amy. Hey there, lady ass kickers. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am joined today by someone you probably already know about because I mention her all the time on the podcast. And that is my bestie, Ms.
I prefer Ms.
I prefer Ms. But you're back. I think that this is your at least third appearance on the podcast. So welcome back. We've missed you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I'm excited to be here. Any excuse to hang out with you is good.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I'll take that compliment. I will take that gift.
Oh, sweet.
Well, and I wanted to have you on. I've been bugging you to come on to talk about something that you talk about a lot on your podcast and you know, on your blog and stuff. And that is the art, really. I think it's an art of standing up for yourself. I call it without being a jerk face. You say standing up for yourself without being a dick.
Yep.
And so let's kind of start there. Let's start with the question of why do women tend to not stand up for themselves? Because men seem to have not as much of a problem giving an opinion, setting a boundary. So why do you think women avoid this so much?
Well, that's interesting. I've never really thought about the large difference between male and female. But I will tell you that there's usually two very strong prevailing fallacies that people buy into. And without getting into like the sordid details of how we have become bought into these and they have become our beliefs, oftentimes it's from past conditioning or experiences or childhood. Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. Messaging that we've, adopted as truth. But we come up with these two notions. And this is what I've seen continuously in the work that I do is people will say, if I stand up for myself, then I am actually being a bitch, that I'm being mean, that somehow your character is flawed because you're doing something kind of maliciously, right? Mm-hmm. And the other, so it's, I'm being a bitch, I'm being a dick. It's negative for me to speak up for myself. And then the other is that if I speak up, I'm purposely inflicting pain on someone, that I am trying to hurt somebody. I am coming from a place of malice. So those are the two things I think people just listening to kind of tap into. What have I made up? Because most of us have that reason. Like, I can't speak up for myself, or I can't tell my mother-in-law that I really don't want her to buy that shit for my house anymore. Or I can't tell my husband how I feel about this sex-related issue because I would be hurting him. I would be purposely hurting him. So ask yourself, what do I make up? What do I believe is true if I actually speak up for myself? Because most of the time it's dismantling that faulty notion. Because and we'll talk about this as we go today, but that's just simply not true. But I know, like, as you talk about a lot of stuff with the inner critic, which I always call your inner shit talker, that will be true in your head. So whatever truth you have made up, it remains rock solid truth until you start questioning it. So that's kind of the first step, is looking at, what do I make up? What do I make up about giving voice to thoughts, opinions, saying no to people, establishing boundaries, all of that stuff where we put other people's comfort, other people's emotions, feelings way far ahead of our own. And I think just kind of starting with that question for yourself helps you understand what you're buying into.
Yeah, what are the myths that you're buying into? That's interesting, because that also goes right along with what I teach about. I taught a free webinar on this a while back, and this is part of the signature program I'm about to teach, is these unwanted identities that we all have, that we all carry around. Usually unconsciously, we don't realize that we have them, but they are very prevalent in everyone's life. Like we have like a list of things, of identities and ways we do not want to be seen by other people. So I think pretty much everyone listening, it's like, as a woman, we don't want to be seen as pushy, crazy, hysterical,
weak,
mean. Yeah. And I think that probably what people make up is like, if I give an opinion that other people aren't going to like, that might be like the unpopular opinion. If I stand up for myself, if I set a boundary, that I'm going to be perceived this way by other people, therefore people won't like me. And I mean, this kind of goes down to biology too. It's like, you don't want to be rejected from the group, from the tribe. If we lived in caveman days, that would mean death. So I think it's like really deep embedded in our brain. Sorry, I was swinging my arms around over here.
Got a little background noise there, Owen.
Hit myself in the face with a pen. Get into it. But yeah, I these are like deep-seated beliefs that we have. So I love that's the first step, is like really like, what are you making up? Absolutely.
Well, I think what you mentioned just now is a huge opportunity for compassion, because a lot of times because I work so much with people who are chronic people pleasers, as do you, right? Like perfectionists. Like, it's all about how I'm being received. It's all about how other people see me, view me. What are they going to think? What are they going to think? And if you understand that from a antiquated perspective of who we were as historical humans, you had to belong. You absolutely had to belong in order to survive. And if you didn't, it meant, imminent death.
The boat. Yeah, exactly.
And what we don't realize is that even though we're in such more of a, quote, civilized society now, there's a lot of shit that is still with us physiologically. I've mentioned this before. I don't know if I've mentioned it on your pod before, but how our fingers prune up when when we get, in a water too long. That's actually a primitive response to help us grip slippery surfaces. We don't need that anymore, but our physiological aspect of being able to grip onto things hasn't changed, even though our circumstances have. So even though you don't have to belong to a society so that you can stay alive, so you can preserve, doesn't mean that we don't still have stuff that is still fueling that desire, fueling that need. So it's a huge place to offer yourself compassion. Like, there is a scientific reason.
I love science.
I love science. Why you really care about belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said that and that you added that on. And one of my favorite topics that you talk about is something that you call intention versus reception. So tell us what that means.
Yeah. So when I formulated this concept, I was kind of like, yes, that's what I've been trying to explain in like paragraphs, right? This is what really
you can tend to be a little verbose.
I don't know what you're talking about. My husband says, you have a certain amount of words that you have to get out in a day. He's right. So a lot of times our greatest pain, I think, when it comes down to speaking up for ourselves, and really the opposite of that, which most of us do, is the people pleasing aspect. I'm just going to cater to all of these different people so that I'll be liked, so that I'll be accepted, so that I'll be worthy. Whatever you make up is the reason you need to do this. But the problem with that is all of those various people, your boss, your husband, your kids, your friends, those are all variables. You are the only constant. So we spin our wheels thinking, how I am received by my husband, how am I received by my boss, how I'm received by, I need to make all of those people receive me in a specific way. And one person could think you're amazing. Another person could think that you really didn't handle yourself well, or that you're an asshole. Or so that's where I think our biggest demise is we pay so much attention to how we're received instead of how we intend to show up. So I always love to say, the only thing that you can control in those scenarios is your intention, who you intend to be. So instead of placing so much emphasis on how that other person is going to receive you, because guess what? We have no control over that, like none at all. But we try to contort and shift, and maybe if I deliver it this way, that person will love me more or receive it well or whatever. So I think going back to the points that I talked about, like the fallacies that we buy into, if your intention is to actually inflict pain on somebody, or your intention is to be a bitch, then yeah, you should probably feel bad about that. You're, right. Like you're being an asshole. Like your intention is.
I've had that intention before.
Right. Yes, exactly. And that does happen. I like to call that taking the low road, when you really give yourself a human hall pass.
Actually, at the end of the day, never feels good. Like, when it's all said and done, but yeah.
Right.
We've all been there.
But I do think that there's room to take the low road sometimes. I definitely do. We're still human, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that the thing that I wanted to really underline here is our intention when we stand up for ourselves is usually not one of malice. We're not trying to inflict pain, yet we act like we are. Like we make that up in our head. So if you get really, really clear about my intention, like, okay, my intention in talking to my spouse about this sex-related issue is not to hurt him. My intention is to grow and develop our relationship. My intention is one of love, that I care so much about us that I want to rectify this. And that is what I am responsible for. I am not responsible for how it lands. And that concept alone is so incredibly freeing, but it is very, very hard for us to wrap our heads around because we're conditioned to think that we are responsible for other people's emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love, because you and I have talked about this. I mean, you've walked me through conversations that I've had in my own personal life. And what I love that the question that you always ask is, what do you need to do and what do you need to say to walk away from that situation and be proud of yourself? And I think it's such a simple question to ask yourself, like when you're going to walk into anything, whether it's conversation with your boss, your kids, your parents, your whomever, your partner.
Yeah. Well, I'll usually use two questions like this to help me get connected back to who I am being. Because again, if you're going to have a conversation with your spouse, or you're going to have a conversation with your boss or your mom or whoever, you're going to have an ideal situation. You're going to, it would be amazing if your husband was like, yay, I can't wait to work on that. And I'm totally not hurt. You know what I mean? Like that would be ideal.
You brought this up.
I'm so glad. I can't wait. Or your mom really, it landed really well. And she's like, what? I just really applaud you for bringing that to me. Most of the time, that doesn't necessarily happen. And that's why we don't say anything, is because we anticipate the reception. So we say, okay, you must be more important than me. So I'm just going to silence myself because I can't bear for this to be uncomfortable. And so a lot of times what I'll do is, well, let me go back. A lot of times we'll say, okay, if I go into this conversation with somebody, this will be successful as long as he sees it my way, as long as my mom agrees with me, as long as he's willing to work on this, as long as they apologize. And we are so invested in the reception, and we're invested in shit that we cannot control. and we're attached to that. So then when we have the conversation, it goes awry and your mom screams and yells at you, or your husband inflicts guilt or projects on you, then you go, I must not be worthy. I suck. I'm awful. See what happens when I stand up for myself. Instead of looking at, in this scenario that it takes two to tango, like they're also responsible for who they are. In this scenario, how do I need to behave? How do I need to show up so that I'm really proud of who I am? And for me, it's almost always in how I communicate that information, which for me is enveloped in grace and kindness. I feel like grace really speaks to your poise. That's your elegance. That is your eloquence. It's your ability to explain in a graceful way. And then your kindness is just being nice, not being an asshole when you're delivering this information. So I always ask myself, when I find myself going into a conversation like this, for me, oftentimes it's with my mom, where there's, this challenge. I'm attached to her. Of course, I have an ideal. I would love it if it landed really well, but I know I have no control over that. So I will ask myself that question that you said, how do I need to show up so that I'm proud of Amy, no matter what, no matter if she loves me, hates me, screams at me, whatever. What is my intention? How can I be proud of me? And another question I'll ask myself, which is almost like just a different iteration, is tomorrow morning when I wake up, how do I want to feel about the woman that I was last night during that conversation? And those two things allow me to get connected to me and what I can control, because how I am received will always be a variable. And that is the bitch that keeps us locked, is trying to please all those other variables. It's a rat race.
Yeah. And I just want to kind of tag on to that. I know you talk about this too. It's like, it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to be fucking bummed out that things didn't go your way.
Yes.
But like, those are two different things. Like, you're allowed to be upset that things didn't go your way, or that you got into an argument, or that person turned things around on you, or whatever. But you still can be proud of how you showed up.
That's exactly right. And oftentimes I'll share an anecdote about two different friendships that I had, both situations where I knew I needed to give voice to something in order to take care of me. One time it was received incredibly well. The other time it was not, and the friendship ended. But both times I had done what I call gear up, where I had prepared myself and gone, okay, Amy, when you deliver this, how do you want to be? How do you want to show? All the stuff that we just talked about. So in both situations, I was able to handle the aftermath without making it mean something about me and my self-worth. So in the situation where it went well, I got to celebrate.
Was that with me?
No.
Oh.
I would have told you.
But we have had those conversations and they've gone well. We totally have.
And then in the other situation, which is what you were kind of just mentioning, the friendship ended and I got to mourn and I was sad and I was really depressed. However, the situation sucked. I didn't suck. And that is the total difference in how you view who you are. It's the ability to not be loved, not be accepted, and not be destroyed by it. Madonna has an amazing quote that says just that. Power is being told you are not loved and not being destroyed by it. So it's not that you all of a sudden all your conversations are amazing once you stand up for yourself. It's not that. It's that you realize that you are really, truly only responsible for who you are, how you are behaving, and how you are conducting yourself and explaining your information. And that's it.
That's all, you guys.
Bye.
Well, and I love, too, that you talk about, and by the way, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm really happy that you're writing a book about this. Yes, I am. I'm excited. With scripts and everything. Yeah. Like, you have to tell people what to say because, I mean, I still come to you all the time. I'm like, help me.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's what I wanted to say is like the gearing up portion of it. And because I know you like to explain, like, you don't walk into these conversations lightly. Like 5 minutes ago, I decided to have this conversation with, my husband, and I'm going to go and do it right now. It's like you spend ample time gearing up, right?
I do if it is something that is foreseeable. So there's a lot of situations, like, for instance, saying no, that you don't necessarily have a ton of time to gear up. If your boss is like, hey, would you mind just going ahead and working overnight tonight? And you're like, sure. Like where you, So with those situations, I always just say, ask for time, like buy yourself some time, right? Like, you know what, give me just a second, or can I think about that? Or how soon do you need an answer? Something like that. But for situations where you're going to go into a conversation, like I need to broach a topic with my husband, I've got to talk to my boss about something, I need to have a discussion with my children, I need to, moms, like I always think life coaching, because who doesn't have mom issues?
Right, everyone.
Right? So, now a note from our sponsor. So I think if you have some time to actually prepare yourself, you can start looking at this stuff. And it can also be, I've done this before, where I'm seriously in the bathroom at a restaurant where I'm going to have dinner with my mom, and I'm sitting on the toilet thinking, when you wake up tomorrow, how do you want to feel about the woman that you are? What do you want to be able to say about your behavior, how you spoke, how you conducted yourself? It has nothing to do with her, right? So I can keep my nose clean. So any little brief moment that you can kind of sift through this a little bit allows you to get connected to what you really want, instead of getting sucked up in the vortex of emotion. Because as soon as you go into a conversation with somebody you're attached to, like your husband, and he starts crying or gets upset, or your mom starts throwing guilt trips at you, you want to take on that emotion as yours, and then you get all freaked out and you get swept up into the emotion of it all. So if you are able to prep a little bit, it kind of helps you untangle what is your responsibility and what's not.
I have a question that doesn't have anything to do with what we were talking about. Do you know where the term keep your nose clean came from? Does it have to do with cocaine, or does it have to do with boogers?
Yeah, it's a drug reference. I am called Joy Junkie for a reason.
Oh, I just started thinking about that when you said, because I've heard you say that expression so many times, and I've never thought about it until just now. And I'm like, is that about boogers or is that about cocaine?
It's about cocaine.
Okay. Moving on. This episode brought to you by the letter Q and Coke. No, it's not. I do not condone that behavior. Oh, good grief. All right.
Don't send hate mail, you guys. Fucking jokes.
This is a podcast not for children. You guys know that. Moving on. And I have one last question for you before we wrap it up here. So, because my ass kickers we talk a lot about the inner critic over here.
Yep.
So how does this topic we've been talking about standing up for yourself, tie into what you call the inner shit talker?
Yeah. So remember how we were talking about at the very beginning, how we're bought into these lies or these ideas of what it means to speak up for yourself. So you have this, like your beliefs are kind of like the roots of the tree, right? They're kind of fueling everything else, and the fruits and the leaves and all of that. And then you have the leaves that are actually like your inner conversation, what is happening, the narrative inside your head. So if you've got this belief that if I stand up for myself, then I'm being a total asshole or I'm inflicting pain on somebody, then that is going to be the conversation that happens inside your mind. So it might sound like something similar to, what are they going to think of me if I actually say no? What will there's no way I could tell my husband this. He'll be so hurt. If I'm not able to stay late at my job, then my boss is totally going to think I'm a slacker, or then I'm not a good employee. And so then you have all this chatter that's happening in your mind that needs to be kind of rerouted. But again, literally rerouted, but if you don't analyze that actual conversation, like we said earlier, it just becomes true. It's just true that you can't let people down. It's just true that you can't say no. It's just, so you have to really look at, where is this coming from? And then start shifting that narrative in order to attach to a truth that you really do want to believe. Because most of the time, when we're attached to that conversation that says, this person has to like you, and like, what are they going to think? And you can't hurt your husband that way. And that really doesn't ever feel good. It never is like, yeah, I'm on top of the world. This is really working. This is really working. Right? So, that is one of a great kind of entry point, is just to analyze what that chatter is in your mind. You know, what's going on? What are the truths that you've created that you can hear yourself saying? Because I'll tell you what, and I'm sure you talk about this all the time, the minute you get out of the head and you actually either say it verbally or you write it down, it automatically starts losing power because we're starting to question it. The only way to change anything that's concrete, a belief that's concrete, is to begin questioning it. And you have to get out of your head in order to do that.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And it's that work, that inner critic work changed my life. I mean, it was like one of the first things that I did, that I kind of found out about when we were in life coach training. I was like, you mean that voice that tells me I'm not good enough? Like, that can be changed? It's not just like embedded in my cells forever and ever and ever. Yes, for sure. And so you have actually created a free like mini workshop on that.
I do. Yeah.
Tell my people all about it so they can run and sign up.
Yeah, it's happening next week, and you can absolutely get your seat now. I have 2 different dates that it's happening, and it's called 4 Easy Ways to Immediately Silence Your Inner Shit Talker. And it's about this exact concept. Like, how do we stop it in its tracks? Like you were saying, like, wait a minute, that voice doesn't have to be true. No, we just have to stop it. We have to recognize it and then create like a new way. And there's some really tangible, easy steps to do that. And it's actually way more accessible than we think. No matter how far down the wrong direction you've gone, you know, like you can absolutely turn it around. So I would love to have you, if you guys go to thejoyjunkie.com/Andrea. So it's super easy to remember. You can grab your seat, and it's going to be on February 17th and 18th. I have a big workbook for you, and should be a really good time. Some prizes.
Do you have 2 different times for people to come that works better for them, like a daytime and an evening time?
I do. So on the 17th, it's at noon Pacific, and the one on the 18th is at 5 p.m. Pacific.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
So,
and if you guys are in, I think it's in Stitcher too. I'm so bad at this, but it's all in the show notes. So yourkickasslife.com/85, you'll find the show notes to Amy's site and that free mini workshop. And you guys should all go over there and sign up, because it's always amazing and it's free. You can't beat that. It's like
it's
a sword
totally
dick, as my
free.
mom likes to say.
What did she say? What did you?
You can't. It's like a sore dick. You can't beat it. You're like horribly inappropriate. Oh my god. My poor listeners.
Awesome. I know you've told me that before, but my God, thank you for that. What a gem.
You're welcome. And my day is complete.
And fade to black. So yes, I would love to have you guys, and it's always such a good time, and I'm going to give away some prizes, and I think it should be good. I'm just excited.
I'm always excited to have you here. I think that this is like the least bit of annoying banter that we've done together. Like we were very profesh on today's episode.
We had lots of content.
We did. I'm like, with total transparency, you guys can't see me right now. I was telling Amy all about it. I got a peel, like a glycolic peel. And so like my face is in that stage now where it's like starting to like freeze, and I'm going to have like lockjaw pretty soon.
Where you have, it's almost like you have a permanent like face mask like drying on your face.
Like
where you're like,
saran wrap.
Yeah, could
like
you hand me that drink over there real quick? I can't move my lips.
That's exactly it. So I'm over here like listening and I'm like, oh my God, it's starting to itch.
My husband, when I have a face mask on like that, I'm like, honey, please don't try to make me laugh. And he'll try to make me laugh, so I have to I crack the mask on the side. And I'm like, you are being a dick. That's a dick move. Your intention is one of malice.
Right? He needs your book. He needs to go to your mini workshop. The Joy Junkies / Andrea.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Well, we'll wrap it up on that note.
Yeah.
This episode brought to you by the letter Q and glycolic peels.
And okay.
All right, ass kickers. Thank you so much for being here and putting up with us. As always, I will see you next time. And until then, I'll see you out in cyberspace. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.